my name is Claire Whips. I am the Skills Project Director at Sussex Chamber of Commerce, leading on the LSIP for Sussex. I'm also going to introduce Kirsten Trussell, who is going to be presenting to you today. She is our strategic expert at the LSIP team and has worked with us throughout the LSIP during the Trailblazer as well. Kirsten's got an immense knowledge and experience in the world of skills and education, but as well in economic and strategic development. I'm also going to introduce quickly one of our stakeholder engagement leads, Melanie Butcher, who's been leading on the deep dive into the construction and engineering sectors. The other two stakeholder engagement leads, unfortunately, couldn't be with us this morning. They are Dan Warman and Nora Davies. And finally, I'd like to introduce Louis Holmes, who is our LSIP coordinator and basically keeps us all organised and on track. So that's the team. I'd just like to welcome everyone to the Case and Roadmap for Change workshop. I'm just going to do a little bit of a recap on the LSIP. And I know a lot of you here today have already got a good knowledge of what the LSIP is, but for those who don't, the local skills improvement plans, we were one of the 8 trailblazers across the country that actually already have our trailblazer reports. The LSIPs now form part of the government's post-16 Technical Education Act. It's no longer a bill, it's an act, and it's being rolled out across 38 areas of the country. Because we're slightly ahead as a trailblazer area, what we're doing is slightly different to some of the other areas, and we are now kind of going deeper, doing deeper dives into our key sectors for the LSIP. But we're also refreshing and looking at data that we had from this time last year for the LSIP Trailblazer. And then we're just refreshing. We're not starting again. We're not chucking the baby out with the bathwater. We're literally refreshing, revising, and seeing how things have changed in the last year. So without further ado, I will pass over to Kirsten and she will present the findings and our roadmap case for change. Over to you, Kirsten.
Thanks, Claire, and welcome everybody. It's very nice to see you all, although I can't actually see you all. I can only see, I think, 9 people on my screen, but which is I find quite disconcerting, but we'll be looking at the presentation anyway. So how is this going to work today? We have a significant number of slides to share with you because what we're doing is sharing with you a refresh of the findings that Claire has just described. So this presentation, this set of slides that we're going to be sharing will actually be an annex to the LSIP. So it's a pretty robust, pretty informative set of slides, which is a lot to talk through in an hour and a half. And I won't be going into the detail of every piece of information on every slide. We will take it section by section. So there are 4 or 5 different sections, and we'll stop after each section with an opportunity for questions. What I would ask you to do, could you please put your questions into the chat if you have any questions or comments, and then when we stop after each section, we'll look at those comments in the chat and we'll take a couple of those depending on how time's going. We did this yesterday in person, and we had a good amount of time to discuss each section, so we should be okay. And then any questions that are left unanswered from the chat and any questions which you have that you take away or that you think of after the event, then we'd ask you to email those to us and we'll deal with those collectively and put a response on the website, I think, to all of those questions that people may have. And in terms of the slides, they will be, or this presentation will be available. It is in draft and it will be available. We've got a presentation to our board on Thursday, and we've got 2 workshops on Friday and Tuesday. And once that is done, we'll be sharing this presentation along with executive summaries of the deep dives that Claire mentioned. I know you're covering that in next steps, Claire, but I just want to stop people from thinking they've got to scribble down every bit of information from every slide. So this will go public probably in about, well, by the end of March anyway, at the latest. And any sort of providers in the room will be thinking about how they can use this for their accountability agreements that they need to be doing for government. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing. Bear with me. I'm not so used to Teams, so I'm a Zoom girl. Okay, so now I can't see anybody, so won't be able to get my attention. Claire, if you need me, just shout.
Will
Okay.
do.
So this first presentation is first part of the presentation is the case for change, and we'll look at Sussex in context, and then we'll look at what needs to change and why. And for the purposes of the Sussex LSIP, Sussex comprises Brighton and Hove and East and West Sussex. Okay, so the geography of the Sussex LSIP, this hasn't changed. This hasn't changed from the Trailblazer. It is an inverted T, which forms a functional economic area, and that comes down from Gatwick in the north, down through to Brighton, a significant travel to work area, and then from Chichester and Bognor in the west and across to Hastings in the east. And what you can see from that map is that that is where the greatest concentration of businesses and education and skills providers can be found. We've got huge swathes of rural across Sussex, and we anticipate that those rural areas will be swept up in, not wholeheartedly, not completely, but by the fact that we've included land-based as one of our key sectors. And talking of the key sectors, so there are 6 which we included in the original Trailblazer. Now, what you can see is that they're sectors which contain probably more than one sector. So they're groupings of sectors. And for the deep dives, we've focused on construction by itself, on digital IT and technology, engineering and manufacturing is one of its own, health and care, including bio, life sciences and pharmaceutical is one, land-based is one, but visitor and hospitality has been split out by itself, and creative and cultural has been split out by itself. And in the rest of this presentation, where you see a reference to health and care, it will include bio, life sciences and pharmaceutical. Where you see a reference to digital, it will include IT and technology. Where you see visitor on its own or visitor and hospitality on their own, they are referring to those sectors only. If it's the entire sector, we've named all of those individual sectors. And we are doing some thinking on those sectors, and it may well come out slightly differently when we write the full document. How did we choose them? By the numbers of people that they employ, by the number of businesses in that sector, but also we were informed by the work that the local enterprise partnerships and the local authorities have done over many years, really into establishing what the key sectors are in Sussex. Okay, so to move on and have a look at the Sussex economy and the labour market highlights, much of this remains the same or fairly similar from when we did the Trailblazer. We were only talking about a year ago, and in terms of data, data doesn't update that often. The data that we're looking at for this analysis, the business data comes from 2021, the claimant data comes from 2022, the demographics will be from 2021, I think. So Just to draw out from this slide, something I think which isn't a surprise to anyone is the fact that Sussex has an ageing population, in general older than the national average, with Brighton and Hove and Crawley being exceptions. And we all know that there are significant, and have been for a long time, significant areas of deprivation along the coast. That deprivation has been exacerbated by the pandemic, and in the main, those areas have been slow to recover from the pandemic, and things are now being impacted further by the cost of living crisis. And from this slide, sticking on the theme of the ageing population, that has impacted on labour supply in the area, because large numbers of the 50+ workforce left during or just after the pandemic. And you'll have seen in the news just recently, and possibly something coming out in the budget today around encouraging the 50+ population back into the workforce, and talk of apprenticeships potentially for encouraging that population back into work. In terms of a tight labour market, Sussex mirrors the national trend, and that's a result of changing immigration rules, the pandemic, and inflationary pressures. So on this slide, we start to introduce claimant data. So as I said, data from the latter part of 2022. So as you would expect and hope, there's been a decline in claimant numbers across Sussex since the pandemic, but there are areas in North Sussex where the rates remain double or almost double the same time in 2019, and across Sussex, the decline in the claimant count has stalled or slowed completely. And we move into job occupations and postings, and we can see in that bottom right hand corner that nurses and care workers continue to be the most in-demand occupations if we look at the number of unique job postings over the last 3 years. Just something I should have said actually before I go any further. So all of this high level summary comes from a piece of analysis that Always Possible, a local Sussex organisation, have done for us of employment job claimant data, and that will be an annex to the final LSIP. So you'll have the actual sort of the data behind these high level summary available to you. In terms of business growth, we're looking at 2021 data, and there was a net decline in Wealdon, Horsham and Eastbourne, and Brighton and Hove, which normally sees high levels of business growth, experienced significantly less net growth than is typical. In terms of the makeup of businesses, a third of all business in Sussex are businesses from professional, scientific, technical and construction industries. Okay, so that's the end of that section. I'll just stop sharing my screen. Okay, so are there any questions, comments, reflections? And I know I've only pulled out a couple of points from each slide. There's a lot of information on there, and you don't have the actual sort of data, graphs, etc. to hand. But is there anything anybody wanted to pick up on, question before we move on? Is there anything in the chat, Claire? No. No. Okay, cool. All right, we will move on. Okay, so now we look at the challenges. So what needs to change and why? So what are the challenges that have come through? So the following slides are based on the areas that we identified through the Trailblazer LSIP. So we're focusing on labour market, we're focusing on skills provision, sector profiles, accessibility, and skills policy. And the slides provide an overview of the challenges that were identified and drawn out from the deep dives that the stakeholder engagement leads have undertaken between November and January recently, and also the challenges that came from the Trailblazer LSIP. And most recently, really quite extensive work has been undertaken in that short time frame, talking to employers, talking to sector bodies, providers, and other stakeholders. And there have been 92 one-to-one employer interviews. We've spoken to 31 providers, and 140 different people have attended various different workshops. It's specifically around the sectors. Within the deep dive executive summaries, there's additional information on the particular technical and soft skill requirements that have been identified through those conversations. They're not in this set of slides. They are in the deep dives in the exec summaries, which will sit alongside this slide pack. And as I said before, that will all be shared with stakeholders by the end of March. Okay, so to start with labour market supply, there's a couple of slides on supply, so there's a fair few points. What's new? So some of this is, it remains the same. Some of this you'll recognise, some of it you'll recognise as being national issues. Sussex isn't particularly different in its supply challenges. So we've got high inflation levels, we've got labour shortages, that's leading to a demand for higher wages, which is putting further pressure on the supply of skills. We've got the challenge of the great resignation of the over 50s, which I mentioned before, which is limiting the supply of labour. And the Gen Z population are reportedly more choosy about the kind of work that they will do, and how they have different expectations of the workforce. And what we've heard, and it's not necessarily through all of the sectors, but some of the sectors, particularly Gen Z, are being selective in the jobs that they will take. I can hear, is everybody on mute? Because I can hear something, I can hear talking in the background. If we can just make sure that everyone's on mute, please. Okay, and on this slide, so wanted to draw out particularly the visitor and hospitality sector, and creative and cultural workforce. So the pandemic and the lockdowns and the extended closure left the sector in quite a bad way, and I think the workforce has been impacted as well, and they've become de-skilled and potentially less resilient. And in quite a lot of cases, the workforce are seeking higher paid work in other sectors where perhaps there's more confidence that jobs will be there for them. Okay, so moving on to demand. So what is new in terms of demand? So there are, and there were before, and there continue to be, high numbers of job vacancies and high staff turnover in all sectors, but it is seemingly chronic in the visitor, hospitality, creative and cultural, health and care, construction and land-based sectors, and in seasonal and part-time jobs. And something else to draw out, the last bullet point there, so gap in skills at middle to higher management levels, that was present last time we did this work. But the point that's come in most recently is around the visitor and hospitality businesses, where they're struggling to recruit full stop. They're particularly struggling to recruit at management levels, and inexperienced staff are being promoted and are lacking the skills that they need to fulfill those roles. And then the next couple of slides I've just pulled out from the work that the stakeholder engagement leads have done on the sector deep dives, some of the significant or the most significant skill shortages that are being experienced by local employers in the key sectors. Some of those came through before, some of these are new, some of them won't be a surprise. Some of them are particularly specific in terms of what's needed. And what you'll find is when we publish the deep dives, the executive summaries, you'll see this and more, and then the full reports that the stakeholder engagement leads have done, they run to many pages, and there will be a lot more information and a lot more specifics in those reports that can be pulled out. Just leaving you a couple of minutes to look at that. Okay, so moving on to workforce development. So sticking with labour market and looking at workforce development. Very little has changed here, which is disappointing. The issues remain the same, and it would seem that workforce development sort of continues to fall to the bottom of the priority list as businesses' operational costs continue to spiral. That may not be true of all businesses, and it may not be true perhaps of some of the larger businesses, but certainly within the SME market, that is a particular challenge. Apprenticeships are still proving to be challenging for many employers, not all employers, not necessarily all sectors in quite the same way. There may be different challenges for different sectors. The skills system is still seemingly overly complex and inaccessible to employers, and that is obviously not all employers, but it is a strong message that comes through in the conversations we've had, through the surveys that we've done. And some employers, not all employers, are saying that the skills system funding framework doesn't necessarily fit with what they need in terms of training for their employees. And finally, this one's come up quite a few times. It's very specific, but businesses in thinking about their requirements around net zero and climate change are reluctant to invest in training for their staff because of the lack of clarity around policy, without knowing exactly the direction that we're going in and where initiatives might be. They're reluctant to invest. And then looking at skills provision. So again, nothing very much has changed. The first bullet point here is feedback from the education skills providers, and like businesses, they are struggling to recruit. They have significant recruitment challenges for teaching and assessing staff, and they are struggling to find the funding and the time to offer professional development to their existing staff. And yeah, again, you can see coming through their dissatisfaction with apprenticeships. Again, that's not all businesses. For some businesses, they work really, really well. For other businesses, not so. And then there's the third bullet point there, looks at consultation, and businesses are suggesting that in the past they haven't been regularly consulted, and that impacts on the kinds of provision that is coming through. And the bottom bullet point I'd like to draw out there, employability skills, and I'm sure that's something that's really familiar to all of us. And businesses continue to say that they are as important as technical skills, as academic qualifications. And businesses will often say that they can train people in the technical skills. What is harder to train is the employability skills. And then a quick look at sector profiles. So this is just the kind of the picture that's coming through in response to the different sectors, and a lot of this will be fed back through the providers themselves and the colleges and sort of independent training providers, really in terms of what they're hearing from young people in terms and adults in terms of those sectors. So this information you'll see covered in much more detail in the deep dives. But generally, there's a lack of understanding of the sectors in Sussex, a lack of understanding of how those sectors have moved on and where they're going in the future, confusion around qualifications and new qualifications such as T levels. And yeah, I think sort of some of the sectors where wages are not as high as in other sectors, not understanding what the benefits of working in those sectors might be. Accessibility's come through, and it continues to come through strongly in this work that we've done most recently, and it covers a variety of areas, and it looks at accessibility of training and of employment for people with special educational needs and disabilities. It looks at the fact that transport is not always available or is high cost for accessing provisional employment in rural areas, for example. We've heard that inconsistent broadband coverage affects people trying to access training, for example, or businesses trying to go about their everyday work. We've heard of low digital literacy amongst older generations in terms of upskilling and limiting their access to online learning. So none of these will be new to you, but it's important that we keep them on the radar, and it's not necessarily going to be through the LSIP itself and the direct delivery that these are addressed, but it's important that these messages get out there to all of our stakeholders. Okay, and then finally, in terms of skills policy, so reiterating some of the things that you've already heard. So businesses are reporting lack of clear direction, information, and timelines from government on initiatives and funding. A an issue around businesses wanting to invest in skills due to the cost of them, lack of clarity in government policy, and an apprenticeship system that is overly complex and doesn't meet the needs of local employers. Again, as I said, that's not all employers, it is some employers. So you'll see that there are threads running through all of these challenges, and that some of them are kind of repeated, but we felt it was important to put them into pots of challenges so they can be clearly understood. Okay. Claire, rather than me stop sharing, are there any questions that have come through this section?
Yeah, just one.
Okay, I will stop sharing them. Bear with me. Okay, I'm back.
Marvelous. It was just Jessica Hammer has asked which business areas are in the professional, scientific, technical. Is it a range of industries or dominated by one? All of the data that we've done around those industries and the labour market have been used from SOC codes. So I've just been frantically looking up that SAP code, and it's basically it's a variety of organisation types. So professional, you're looking at things like business, public services. It could be health and care associate professionals as well. Then you've also on the technical side, you've got, and the scientific side, you've got science, engineering, and technology. So it really is a range of businesses. The SOC code that we've used for that particular piece of information is quite a high level one. It doesn't go down right down to the to the particular roles within that industry. So it's very overarching. Hopefully that helps.
Cool. We've got Andy W with his hand up.
Hi, Kirsten. Yeah, Andy Williams from Adrian Worthing Council.
Hi, Andy. Sorry,
Hi,
I didn't
how are you?
recognise you, Andy. Sorry.
That's fine.
It's been a
I won't
while.
take it. I won't take it personally.
Do.
Um, my question. So everything makes complete sense to what's presented thus far. My question was the sample size on the deep dives. So everything that's coming through is makes complete sense as what we're hearing, hyper locally. But I'm just wondering about the sample size that you managed to gather on the sector dies, I guess, in terms of, what, not percentage, but I presume it's from a good sample.
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, I'll let you take that one.
We've, as Kirsten said at the beginning, we've been out to have one-to-one kind of large, full-scale interviews with a small number of businesses. I think it was around 92 without having the information to hand. We've also had surveys. We've done telephone surveys and online surveys with this time round around 300-400 businesses, which has added to, we did exactly the same survey a year ago, so we're getting trend information on those surveys now to see how things are changing. We've also had a couple of hundred people come along to the deep dive workshops that we held recently. It would have been great to get more businesses involved. However, we had from November to January to do this. So I actually think within that time frame, it was not a bad average. However, and this is something we'll talk about later, going forward, we will be kind of picking areas within the deep dives that we're going to dive into further as well. So it's not, this is really a snapshot in time. And then what we'll be doing going forward is continuing those conversations, seeing how things are improving, hopefully, what the impact is, but also how things are changing for businesses. So this is kind of like a stepping stone, if you like.
And what we'd suggest is that people don't necessarily take what they see in front of them because of what you've highlighted in terms of sample size and run off and right, we're going to do this. Actually, okay, that's interesting. Let's explore that. Let's talk to some of the businesses around us that are in that sector and see if this resonates. And is it that we need to start delivering X, Y, or Z? It's never going to be a true representation of every business in every sector.
We've had another question from Rich Byrne about are all the businesses within the sector, so within the chamber, I take it that's chamber members, or outside of that. It's a mix. It's some chamber members, it's also other businesses across the area that we've been in contact with, we've been communicating out. So we really do want to speak to all and every business that we can.
Okay. Any more at the moment? Don't be shy. Cool. Okay. Well, let's move on, and we'll have time. We'll have other opportunities, and if you think of something that refers back to what we've already talked about, please don't hesitate to just come back to it. That's absolutely fine. So, back to screen sharing. So, we are now looking at the priorities for change. So we've looked at the challenges, and from those challenges, we've had a good sort of discussion and exploration, and compared to sort of what we came up with last time. And we have we're confident that the priorities that we established last time still remain relevant, and we've updated some of the finer detail within them where necessary. And what we need to just remind everybody of is that there is a remit for the LSIP, and the remit is very much around adding value to what is already happening. So it's not throwing out what's already happening in Sussex. The provision that is already happening is adding value to and focusing on those Sussex-wide specifics that are important to the businesses in the area. Lost my cursor. There it is. Okay, so what are the priorities? So supporting employers in Sussex to recruit, retain and retrain their workforce. So that won't necessarily fall to all of that fall to us as providers or to you as providers, or it may fall to local authorities, it may fall to business support organisations. We'll look at that in a little more detail in a minute. Ensuring that there is a joined up approach to skills provision in Sussex that matches the needs of local businesses. And you'll see the theme coming through here is that it's a Sussex-wide approach to all of these things. It's joined up, it's a single voice, it's a Sussex-wide approach. Building a profile for and raising awareness of the key sectors in Sussex to promote recruitment and retention. Ensuring training and employment in Sussex is open and accessible to all, and speaking with one voice in Sussex to influence national and local policy using an evidence-based approach. So DfE have been very clear with us that LSIP should not be a lobbying document. So our thinking is that if we want to influence policy, then we need to build the evidence to be able to go back and feed into policy development and hopefully influence change. So a little bit more detail on those priorities. So looking at the business support, which I just talked about. So we're thinking about recruitment. You know, some recruitment processes haven't changed for a very, very, very long time. They're clunky. This is business. This isn't talking about providers specifically. It's just business in general. You know, what are the benefits? What are people? What are potential employees looking for these days? What do businesses need to be selling in a tight labour market? How are you going to be attracting? How are you going to be retaining your workforce? So those are just some of the things that that have come through as challenges. And then a workforce development offer that meets local need. And these are the things that have come through really clearly from businesses that we've spoken to, and some of the challenges that their own staff have in terms of workforce development. Okay, so ensuring that there is a joined up approach. So collaboration and consultation, we all know those things very, very well. We all do those things. How do we do that across Sussex? And how do we bring business and education together more? Because I know it's already happening, to innovate, co-design and co-deliver training across Sussex. And then building on the good work that's already happening with the Sussex and Surrey Institute of Technology, if you're aware of that. You've got the universities and you've got colleges working together, focusing on progression pathways in particular sectors for the area. So those things are the things that we believe are priorities that's come through the work that we've done. And then tailoring provision to business needs. So making sure specialist training is available, that training facilities are available. So if not everybody can have all of those things, how do we work together so that as a collective we can share them? Feedback from businesses, making sure that provision is local, affordable, modular and up to date. We talked about employability skills previously. Accreditation, feedback from businesses is that it takes too long to get accreditation in place, and by the time the accreditation is in place, the world's moved on and the qualification is out of date. Lost my cursor, there we go. And then building a profile for and raising awareness of the key sectors. So this is helping people, both young and older people, to understand the key sectors. So what are the key sectors in Sussex? Where is the employment available? What are the kinds of jobs? What do you need to do those jobs? And what are the benefits? What are the good things about those jobs? What do you get from working in those jobs? And how are we going to do that? How are we going to raise awareness? And really important coming through there is that whole accessibility piece and the diversity piece. And it's not to say that this isn't already happening. We've got really good work already happening with the careers hubs in Coastal Capital and in East Sussex. We've got Sussex Learning Network, Job Centre Plus, National Careers Service. So how do we bring them together? How do we do this together across Sussex? And then ensuring training and employment in Sussex is open and accessible to all. So that speaks to the equality, diversity and inclusion point, making sure that everyone has the same opportunity or has equal opportunity to access employment and work, and just picking up on some of those things that we covered before. And again, speaking with one voice in Sussex to influence national and local policy using an evidence-based approach. So if you look at that left-hand column, how do we explore freedoms and flexibilities within the current skills funding system? Some of those things which are challenging us, but there are new levers potentially coming in. So the Education and Skills Funding Agencies recently announced new flexibilities within the adult education budget. Providers with over a £500,000 adult education budget can use a certain percentage of that funding to test and trial new flexibilities. So how can we test and trial that in the local area collectively, gather evidence and feedback on that new lever? And looking at flexi job apprenticeships that has recently been launched, and you know, what sectors would that work in? How can we test it? How can we work with employers to do that? Okay, so I will just stop again. Okay, is there anything coming through? So you will see the synergy there, moving from the challenges through to the priorities. Hopefully you can see the thread running through. Are there any questions or comments on that section?
Yeah, Alison's put in one about is there a common understanding amongst businesses of how to define employability skills? They use the skills builder framework, but it's useful for schools and colleges to know what employers think. Well, generally, I can give an overview. Employers will either use terms such as transferable skills or employability skills or soft skills, and they will not just view it as employability skills, they will be looking at behaviours and attributes as well. I think maybe this might be a good idea to bring in Melanie, and Dan Woolman's just been able to join us now, who's one of our other stakeholder engagement leads, to see what the businesses you've been talking to have said about employability skills, and particularly, do they understand what they are?
I think, Claire, with regards to my sectors, with construction and manufacturing, I think it's around, particularly around the young people, them being work ready. So know that they got to go up in the morning, and turning up to work on time, being motivated, having interest in the actual sector themselves and in that job as well, but also having some of those transferable skills, particularly in both engineering and construction, around the practical skills. So willing to get their hands dirty, as it were, to learn on the job, which is key, to actually, you know, be responsive to instructions and then being able to actually learn as well. So I think they are all the employability skills that, you know, most of the businesses I've talked to are looking for.
Thanks, Mel. Dan, is there anything that you'd like to add from creative and cultural visitor economy? I think we
Where's he
might
gone?
have just lost Dan. He's only just arrived and he's gone again.
I think this is a piece of work within the deep dives. There are the findings of those soft skills, employability skills, transferable skills, whatever we want to call them. They're named. The ones that have come through will be listed for each of the individual sectors. But I think this is a piece of work that we need to do, and will come through in the next stage that we present. I think is the opportunity to do that piece of work. Is there a collective, I don't know what the collective noun for employability skills is, but is there a set of employability skills, a murder of employability skills that we need to that we can come up with across Sussex that we focus on, for example?
Alison's actually got her hand up. Do you want to come in quickly, Alison?
Yeah, thanks for that, and that's helpful. And I think I posted the I'm Alison Cousins. I'm assistant principal at Basvic, and I posted the link for the Skills Builder Hub. They've got kind of 8 skills that they've named, some of which cross over.
Okay.
And I just think if we as educators are sharing kind of similar language, then it's really helpful. And so things like staying positive, aiming high, are some of those kind of aspiration ones. You know, what's coming back to me from the work that I've done, you know, as Careers Link with our sort of link employers, is things like resilience and flexibility that you've sort of talked about. We can build those into those kind of 8 skills that we're teaching. But you know, that skills builder framework is the one that is being promoted out by the Careers and Enterprise Company, by our kind of partners, sort of from sort of central government and sort of nationally. So you know, it seems to me that it again, we can kind of flex that, but if you're aware of the kind of 8 ones that we're teaching as well, then we're sort of training everybody to the same tune.
Does it give you the tools to do that as well, Alison? This
Yeah,
skills
I mean, there's a
builder.
whole. I mean, when you look on that website, there's a whole resource set, and you know, students can do self audits on, you know, where they're at. And then they can choose particular areas that they can work on to develop or to build or to reflect on, you know, how they can demonstrate those in sort of CVs and so on. So that's kind of how we frame our sort of employability work with students.
Okay. Are there more comments coming through, Claire?
Thank you for that, Alison. That's
Okay.
actually really interesting, and I'm going to save that link that you've sent through. We've got one from Angela. Will the priorities be communicated in language, name of the sector themselves, or can the focus be communicated in a different way, i.e. things like net zero, climate, food and drink sector, to show change? I don't know, Angela.
Shall I try and shall I try?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so basically, I mean, I'm in Brighton and Hove Council in economic development team, but I'm specifically focusing on food systems transformation, which is obviously massively important for net zero and climate initiatives. So it's just thinking, you know, if when I did scoping, obviously everything's grouped within the data available, things to do with accommodation and food sector or horticulture, etc., etc. And also you have your groupings, the sectors for this work, which make total sense. But just thinking as a kind of trying to think of ways for anyone, but young people in particular, becoming mobilized into a pathway of work where some skills they're transferable. So working in hospitality and catering often is a starting place for people that end up being a chief exec or something later on. And likewise, you know, in the land-based sector, I know when we went on the visits to Arran Horticulture, the sheer number of skills used in, you know, engineering and marketing, everything like that, again. So it's just thinking if there's a story, I guess that's the easy way to look collectively to attract people in.
And I think that won't happen within the LSIP document, but that is what you'll see coming next is the Future Skills Sussex Improvement Framework, and within that there is a section called Talent, and that is where we start to focus on that awareness raising of the sectors and the jobs and the people, the partners that can get involved in that, and what it is that we can do as a collective in Sussex. So it's kind of putting it back out to all of you. It's the LSIP saying, well, that this is what needs to change. This is what we're suggesting changes, and then how do we all work together to make that happen? So that storytelling piece, I think, is really important, Angela. So yeah, thank you. And we look to the experts to help us to do that.
We've got a few more questions now, Kirsten.
I think we've got time. We're okay.
Excellent. We've got one from Martin Emmett about how unique are the findings to Sussex, and some being kind of like feeding international issues as well. Other responses of individual trailblazer LSIPs, and actually this now accounts for all 38 LSIPs being compared in Whitehall. Might be better addressing some of the issues at a national level. We are, as the majority of the LSIPs, I think 32 out of the 38 are being led by chambers of commerce around the country. We are actually working together and identified where we have commonality. So whether we're concentrating on particular sectors or if we're concentrating on particular themes such as green skills, digital skills, that sort of thing. So we're working together to ensure that we're all feeding back any kind of commonalities as well. At a national level, Department for Education will obviously, the Secretary of State will be signing off all of the LSIP reports. And I am hoping that they will then, as you say, kind of like be doing some kind of matrix around all of those things, because we know there's an awful lot of issues such as aging population. Yeah, in Sussex, it is a big issue, but it's also a national issue. So how can we be working on that at a national level as well? So yes, we would hope that Department for Education will be looking at the things across the board as well. Janet has said it would be useful to do some more work around this. This is often a lack of specific, sorry, my brain's not working. There's a lack of understanding and kind of how we discuss and use of language around employability skills, a lack of clarity around what employers versus employees understand. Janet, do you want to come in on that? Quite a lot there.
Hi there. Yes, thank you, Claire. Yeah, I mean, this is something I've done some work on in the past. I've done some research around employability skills, and I think it's often a lack of understanding between what the employers want and what colleges or schools are providing. And I'm interested, that colleagues from BASVIC are using the skills builder, and whether you've had any response from employers about how that's been received once the young people have gone into the workplace. I just think we need to do a bit more work around this to define exactly, I know providers are working very hard to develop these sort of employability skills, but is that what the employers want, And the other question I have, Claire, which is separate from the employability skills, but I think there are a few elephants in the room still around the barriers to putting in, any kind of roadmap to change, if you like. So, for example, you and I have talked a lot about recruitment shortages for staff in colleges themselves. So, how is that going to be framed in terms of, we know what employers want, we know what providers can offer, but there are still some barriers that we need to make sure are highlighted.
Totally agree, Janet. And that's something that you're actually preempting what Kirsten will be coming on to in a minute as well, because obviously we understand that not only do businesses have skills challenges, but providers have their own challenges as well. To be able to meet the skills needs in the local area, they need to have the workforce and the trained workforce to enable that provision to be put on to meet the skills needs of the area. So that is something that Kirsten will be coming on to in a little while. I think Catherine Balls also just mentioned about she believes that LSIP has agreed with the major projects. Catherine, do you want to elaborate on that? There we go.
Hello, sorry, I was sort of coming in from my sort of Essex based focus, as well as my Sussex hat, working across two sort of sectors. there, but I just know that CELEP and the work that we're doing with the LSIPs in Essex as well, the major projects group, you know, the massive infrastructure projects, etc., have been talking to Louise Aitken and things. I believe that they're looking to use the skills builder around this employability piece, just to have some consistency across all of those projects that are actually happening. So I was just saying it would align with obviously what Alison was just saying, that they're using, if you're looking for something to talk to employers about, if they have all reviewed that and felt that it's something that sort of fits across that huge sort of piece, if you like, for skills, that they'll be looking at, and are going to build that into some of their procurement asks when they're going out to suppliers, etc. as well. Then it could be obviously something that you might want to research into a little bit more to use as a standard piece. But like you say, extra research and making sure it's what employers want, as Janet was just saying, is key. But I think if they've adopted it, I'm sure that they would have had a pretty good look at it before they agreed that as a piece across their whole grouping.
Excellent, thank you for that.
Should we move on, Claire? I think just to make sure that we've got enough time.
Indeed.
Thank you for all of your questions and reflections. And I just spotted a question further up about the slides. Will they be shared? So just for people who came in after the beginning, this slide pack is a fundamental piece of the LSIP and is in draft form at the moment, and will be shared along with the executive summaries of the deep dives that we've been talking about by the end of March, so that it can inform the various different providers that need to be developing their accountability agreements for the DFE. So they'll be published, won't they, Claire, on the website?
Yes, we will be publishing them, and we'll also be sending out communications when they're up on the website. Yeah.
But they are drafted. Just take heed that they are draft, and they may well be not changed wholesale, but we may well tweak in response to feedback that we're getting today, etc., etc. So cool. Okay, right. Let us move on. So, looking at the roadmap for change, what are we going to do? What are we suggesting that we could do across Sussex, working collectively with all of our partners? So, through the Trailblazer, we developed something called the Future Skills Sussex Improvement Framework. And we believe that it offers an opportunity for partners to work collaboratively under one umbrella to support the people and businesses based in Sussex. And there you can see on the right-hand side the different elements of the framework. It is circular. We do believe that intelligence will inform conversation. Conversation may well inform intelligence. Conversation will inform innovation. And it goes on, it goes backwards, it goes forwards. And within that, at the heart of it is governance. And the governance is currently provided through the Future Skills Sussex Board, which is sits within the Sussex Chamber of Commerce and is represented by a diverse mix of organisations. And then your own organisations themselves will have their own governance, and those where it's appropriate will have their own accountability agreements as well. And each of these themes we are suggesting will have a lead or leads, and we'll have core partners, and we'll set those out as we go through. Have I covered everything that I need to? And taking it forward, and you'll see this as we move through, we believe that each of these elements, so intelligence, conversation, innovation, offer, and talent, needs a framework, needs a partnership framework, and needs a set of principles and an action plan that enables everybody, the relevant partners, to come together across Sussex and focus on what's coming out of the LSIP and focus on it collectively to provide a solution or an answer for Sussex. Just to reinforce, that isn't replacing what you're already doing, is adding value to what you're already doing. So it might help you to address something which you're thinking, oh, how do we do that by ourselves? It might be a new piece of work, but it's in addition to to what you're already doing. We're not trying to change what is already happening. So starting with Future Skills Sussex Intelligence. So what we've built through doing the Trailblazer, what we've built through the refresh that we've currently done, and what we've done, to be honest with you, is build on many, many years of research that local authorities have done, that the local enterprise partnerships have done. So we need to make sure that the evidence base is updated regularly. We need to make sure that it's accessible to partners, and in the main, it will incorporate those things that you can see on the screen. And it forms a part of the responsibility of the Sussex Chamber of Commerce as the lead employer representative body for the LSIP. So the suggestion there is that the Sussex Chamber of Commerce lead on this, unless anybody else wants to throw their hat into the ring and jump up and down and say, yay, we love data and evidence so much that we would love to do this, so that Claire doesn't have to. I'm sure she'd be very happy about that. But what we would expect is that local authorities, LEPs, local skills networks work together to support this, provide the data that they have, that they're already working with. Employers will feed in through the conversations that we have with employers, through the other work that we do with employers. Just referencing the unit for future skills, it's a new analytical and research unit within the DFE. It's been set up to improve the quality of jobs and skills data across the different government departments. So fingers crossed that is something that works for us moving forward. Progress to date. So we've done lots of research and analysis, surveys, deep dives, and you can see the documentation that has emerged from those pieces of work. And next steps. So as I've said, creating a partnership framework, set of principles and an action plan. So how do we come together? What does that framework look like? How we are going to agree to work together to regularly review and refresh the evidence base, to build on the sector deep dives, probably with a focus on skills for net zero and climate change and equality, diversity and inclusion, but that doesn't rule out other things. And then something which has come through really strongly through our research is making sure that we've got a better understanding of what's happening with programs to support people with special educational needs and disabilities within the key sectors. So that would probably form a part of the deep dives as well. And you'll start to see a theme emerging here. So it will become more and more familiar as we move through the slides. So Future Skills Sussex conversation. So the DFE expects the employer representative bodies leading on LSIP, so in this case Sussex Chamber of Commerce, to continue to sustain employer engagement networks and to be recognised as a key conduit for engaging employers around their skills needs and helping employers understand and navigate local skills systems. So we believe that ongoing conversation, addressing the comments that we hear from business that they're not consulted regularly enough, and we've yet to determine how that will happen. We've got some ideas, but again, we suggest that Sussex Chamber of Commerce lead on this because it's part of their responsibility, but we recognise that it's already happening. Your organisations will already be having these conversations and informing your own strategy, your own curriculum, your own whatever that might be, action plans. So how do we come together without trying to create something too complex? How do we bring that intelligence together, and how do we make sure that those conversations are coordinated in a way that supports businesses? So progress to date, some of the things that we've already mentioned. Through the original Trailblazer, there were sector-specific conversations with businesses. We've had the sector deep dives, most recently with one-to-one conversations, and then business workshops. So those are the conversations that the LSIP has initiated and carried out. And then next steps. So very familiar by now, creating a partnership framework, a set of principles and an action plan to continue regular engagement with Sussex businesses. So looking at what those actions might be. So facilitating a Sussex-wide approach to sector-based conversations. How do we do that? How does that best work? Embedding a focus on equality, diversity and inclusion when we're engaging with businesses to understand what they're doing well, and to understand how we might share that across the piece. And then also a responsibility will be to raise awareness of and build engagement in local and regional skills initiatives. So helping businesses to understand the things that are available to them. Okay, so moving on to innovation. So we are suggesting that a test bed for skills innovation and collaboration would be a good way of innovating, of collaborating to develop, to pilot and evaluate provision. And if we can do that in the way that business does it, so working at pace, accepting failure, moving forward, you know, and trying, testing and trialing and testing and trialing until we find the thing that works, and then implementing that. And using that test bed to explore different delivery models, accreditation options, different funding models, and the test bed doesn't necessarily, we're not expecting that to be a physical thing. If it is a physical thing, then fantastic. You know, if someone puts their hand up and says we've got the perfect centre for that here, we could do that here. It could be virtual. It could just be a concept. But what are the parameters? What's the framework that sits around that enables you to work together and feel safe in the knowledge that there is a process for this, and you're not putting yourselves at risk by getting involved in this. It builds on work that's already been happening, and we'll look at that now. Oh, just to focus here. So in terms of the lead for this piece of work, now this is purely our suggestions, and we're completely open to discussion. But Sussex Learning Network and FE Sussex and SCTP, to be honest with you, all have a mix of further education and higher education partners, be they colleges, be they universities, be they training providers within their networks. And it feels to us like a network provider might be somewhere where this piece of work could be held, because if we look at what's coming next, so progress to date, FE Sussex with its colleges has led on both the Codes project and the Greener Sussex project. So the Codes project working on modular digital provision, in very high summary. If Claire wants to come in there, you can, but don't necessarily need to.
It was literally just to say that they're through FE Sussex, each of the colleges are actually working in collaboration together, and with SDF, the Strategic Development Fund Round 1, which was the Greener Sussex, and this one is the first time that the colleges have actually worked collaboratively across the whole of Sussex. So it really does go to show kind of like that good practice and how things can be done. But I'll let Kirsten carry on now.
Cool, thank you. So that is, the Codes project is being tested as we speak. So they received funding, it's being tested, it's in an innovation stage. A Sussex-wide approach to investing in green skills. So Greener Sussex, again, came through the Strategic Development Fund across Sussex, all of the colleges working together, different strands of green skills. And that project was developed, it was trialled, and it's now being delivered across Sussex. And then improving the technical skills of teaching staff. So back to the full teacher encounters, Coastal Capital Careers Hub is running this. It took took the learning from the LSIP, picked up that was something that was missing, that was needed, and is now basically working with schools and colleges to help staff members get back out into industry. And the Codes project is doing something similar with knowledge exchange industry placements. Okay, next step. So this slide's a bit more, a bit busier. Again, sticking to that framework. So the partners that we've talked about coming together, working to develop a partnership framework, a set of principles and an action plan to establish this test bed that we've talked about. And what you can see in those 5 boxes underneath are findings that have come through the deep dives in particular. And they are suggestions of specific skills gaps, skills needs that the test bed could focus on in the first instance. There are others. We've just picked this sort of selection as something that could get the test bed up and running. So we've got a knowledge exchange program there to help businesses improve their understanding of the skills needs for net zero and climate change. I know some of the we've got the greener Sussex project, but also some of the universities are working very much on exploring what the skills needs will be on that. And picking out another one, for example, the Accessible Leadership and Management Training Programme for middle managers in visitor and hospitality. So we talked earlier on about staff members being recruited, inexperienced staff members being recruited and not necessarily, promoted and not necessarily having the skills for management. But it's a very difficult sector to access training in. You work shifts, you work antisocial hours. It's low paid, so how do we provide a management course that works for that sector? Can we work with the businesses to do that? Just some examples there. And then moving on to offer. So this is focusing on particular things that would work across Sussex. So it's not everything. It's not saying that each of you has to offer the same curriculum. It's not saying that all of you have to offer the same thing. It is looking at the challenges that we've seen coming through, the priorities that we've highlighted, focusing on some of those specific things. It might be, for example, employability skills. It might be net zero climate change. It might be diversity and inclusion. How can we address those things as a collective? How can we learn from the Strategic Development Fund projects? How can we learn from the innovation test bed? And how do we implement those things across Sussex? So again, it's a similar grouping of partners, similar suggestion for leads, and then you'll see in that bottom left-hand corner some of the potential benefits of doing so. And they've come through the existing projects. They've proven that there are economies of scale. It does give consistency across place. It gives a bit of a profile for Sussex. So that's the rationale for that one. And then progress to date. So we go back to the Greener Sussex project that's moved out of innovation and into the offer. And next steps, again, partnership framework, set of principles and an action plan. And some suggestions, again, coming through the work, the research work that we've done, coming through the deep dives. And I'm going to pick on actually what's really important in this one, and this comes to Janet's comment earlier. So we feel that as part of the offer, this is partly about and if this doesn't come through clearly enough on the definition slide, I'm just reflecting as I'm talking, we might need to change that. So this is about the Sussex-wide offer, but also we believe that you can't have an offer without making sure that the providers have got the staff and the skilled workforce that they need in order to provide that offer. So suggestions here, developing a Sussex-wide continuing professional development offer for further education staff. So it's not saying that there is one CPD across Sussex and that's all you do, but it's saying, can there be an overarching CPD that everybody gets involved in and it's shared delivery, shared costs across the piece? Potentially a Sussex-wide campaign to recruit skilled professionals. So can we come together and I don't know what that might look like, and that's for this collective of partners to explore. So just as important is the workforce, the provider workforce, as is the offer in this one, and I will reflect on that previous slide. And then finally, talent. So this is a collaborative approach to creating a better understanding and awareness of the employment career opportunities in Sussex. So we've talked about this previously. These organisations are already doing a sterling job within this area. How do we bring them together more so that there's more connectivity? We're talking the same language, we're promoting the same things, we're telling the same story, so that we're raising the profile, increasing awareness, and increasing the supply of people into the sectors and jobs in Sussex. And an example of a piece of work that came out of the LSIP. So West Sussex County Council recognised a priority within the LSIP around digital skills, around digital careers, and launched Digital Futures West Sussex, which is exploring digital careers for young people and adults and connecting them with businesses. And next steps on this one, again, creating the framework, the set of principles and an action plan, developing a Sussex-wide approach to raising the profile of the priority sectors, developing a Sussex-wide approach to raising awareness and understanding, and then a Sussex-wide approach to increasing the supply of people, and really important is embedding a Sussex-wide approach on equality, diversity and inclusion. And I know from my work with the careers hubs, for example, that's really instrumental and key in the work that they do. Is there benefit to be had by looking at that on a Sussex-wide basis? Okay, one last slide and then we're done. Governance piece, we've talked about this briefly before. So the Sussex Chamber of Commerce itself as an organisation is responsible for delivering on the LSIP. Their governance for this piece of work is the Future Skills Sussex Board. How we then create a governance framework which links back into these individual elements that we've talked about, and the partnership agreement, the partnership framework that we'll have there is yet to be decided. And as we've said previously, your own individual organisations will have your own governance arrangements which will link into how you get involved within the LSIP. So, whistle stop tour. If you have any, Claire will do next steps, but just the email address, if you've got any further questions or comments that you wanted to add, is on this slide, skills@sussexchamberofcommerce.co.uk. So scribble that down quickly now if you need it, and I will stop sharing and over to Claire. Do we have any more questions?
I don't think there's any major questions. There's some good chat going on around use of National Careers Service assessments for participants as a first step, which works really effectively. That was from Nikki Pettit, who's an employability coach. Celine is saying from a construction perspective, skills boot camps have worked very successfully. However, last time she looked, there was only one employer provider that was funded in East Sussex. Is anyone going for this in Sussex? Mel, do you want to come in on that? Because that's your sector.
Yeah. Hi, Celine. Just to say, one of the things talking about with the skills providers, they would love to put skills boot camps on, but actually because of the teacher assessor shortage, particularly in construction, they are unable to do this at this moment in time. So rather than skill boot camps, they are looking at alongside the National Career Service, they are looking at putting on swaps basically. So the sector work-based academies rather than the boot camps. It's just purely that they haven't got the staff at this moment in time. There's such a shortage in those areas and they're stretched delivering the full-time and the apprenticeship qualifications. So I think there's, in the future, yes, we would love to, but at the moment they haven't got the opportunity to do that.
You're on mute, Claire.
Sorry, I was just saying, Celine, I noticed you had your hand up. Did you want to come in on that?
Yes, I agree totally. Melanie's absolutely spot on. Is that certainly within the FE sector, they don't have the flexibility or capacity to deliver the boot camps. And I've worked in FE, I know that it's always going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
However, there are construction specialist providers who do have that capacity and flexibility. And I've just started working with one particular company that I'm doing something in Kent for. And again, same problem, because it's not
East Sussex, it's the whole of the South East. Only Flannery's have gone for construction bootcamp funding. So I think there is an opportunity maybe to look outside the FE and look at some of those private construction training providers who will have that capacity and flexibility to deliver.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, Celine. I'm aware of Flannery's, and I know they do kind of plant operations, and I know there is a employer charity who works with them on the veteran service side, who in Sussex, but they actually deliver in the kind of Midlands, Kent area. So I'm totally aware of that, and totally take your point, as it were, about looking outside of those kind of commercial delivery training hubs who are delivering that construction side. Unfortunately, there's not that many of them in Sussex, but yeah.
But they can deliver in Sussex. So the one that I'm dealing with is he's not based in Kent even, but they have the flexibility to deliver and meet the needs of the local employers.
Yes, I understand that totally.
Wonderful, thank you. There's just a couple of other points. Kim from the Talent Accelerator, she's saying about raising the profile of the creative careers across the patch as well, and that's being facilitated by the Delaware Pavilion. And then it's nice to see some people doing a bit of networking, Alison and Rich doing a bit of networking as well. So if there's no other burning questions, if you do think of anything that you think, oh, wish I'd asked, after the workshop, then please do email us at skills at Sussex Chamber of Commerce .co.uk, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. I just wanted to give you just a little bit of information about the next steps. I know that Kirsten mentioned we will be taking the deep dive executive summaries along with this case and roadmap for change to our board meeting, which is happening this Thursday. It's a very busy week this week. On Friday and then the following Tuesday, we're also holding some workshops with attendees from all of those organisations that Kirsten that are in the proposed framework for change. So we'll be looking at how we can kind of like bring those partners together, how we might be able to work on some development and what we can be taking forward into our LSIP report for submission to DFE at the end of May. Once that is all done, after next week, as Kirsten also mentioned, we will be publishing the deep dive executive summaries. At the moment, we won't be publishing the full evidence-based reports because there's 6 of them with about 50 pages each. And to be honest, we're still editing them. So we need to edit and design them before they can come out. However, the executive summaries do provide an overview of those employability and technical skills, the key findings and the recommendations. So they will still be very useful for providers in putting together their accountability agreements. So all of that will be on our website by the end of March, and we'll be emailing and communicating out to everybody when they're published. And also we will be having further stakeholder engagement virtually and hopefully face to face once we have submitted our report, and we'll be able to come back out to you during the summer and basically kind of like, what are those next steps? What are we going to be doing now that we've actually got the thing written and submitted? And just say thank you very much for your time. Really glad you could join us all today, and do watch this space for more information coming out nearer the end of the month. Thank you so much.